Have you ever noticed how most people only react when the crisis is already on the TV? The oil price is already through the roof. The market is in a full-blown panic, and the smartest investors have already seen the pattern and made their move. They understood the chain reaction before the headlines made it obvious. Let me ask you something more direct. When a single narrow waterway carrying a fifth of the world's daily oil gets blocked, do you really think the problem stays with the oil traders? Or do you think it spills over like a flood into interest rates, mortgages, and property markets thousands of miles away? This isn't a movie. As of mid-March 2026, a US-Israeli military operation has reportedly gone live. And in response, Iran has effectively turned the Strait of Hormuz into a parking lot. 200 oil tankers are sitting dead in the water. This isn't just another war headline. It is the first domino in a very specific chain reaction. And if you understand how these dominoes fall, you can see not just risk, but a clear signal for your next real estate trade. First, I'm going to show you why this isn't random chaos, but a predictable sequence. Second, we'll look at why this earthquake will create two totally different stories in Europe and Dubai. And third, I'll show you why investors who only look at local property prices without understanding the global game board are not being cautious. They're just playing blind. Now, let's trace the chain reaction. The first effect is brutally simple. The oil price. With 20% of the world's supply suddenly held hostage, the cost of energy goes wild. Brent crude is flirting with over $100 a barrel, but oil doesn't stay in the oil market. It's not just the price at the pump. It's like a fever that spreads through the entire global economy. It's in the cost of moving goods, making products, even the fertilizer for our food. An energy shock like this doesn't just make things more expensive, it changes everything. It's a massive injection of inflation just when the world's moneymen, the central banks, were about to relax. And this is the part property investors can no longer afford to be naive about. When inflation gets a second wind, the central banks have one job: put out the fire. Their main tool is the interest rate. They were getting ready to make money cheaper in 2026. Now that whole plan is out the window. They're forced to keep rates higher for longer. Some are even whispering about new rate hikes. This is how a missile strike in the Persian Gulf ends up hitting your mortgage. It's a simple playbook. Geopolitical fire sparks an oil shock. The oil shock fuels inflation, and the fight against inflation makes all borrowing more expensive. But here is where the lazy thinking stops and the real opportunity begins. This shockwave does not hit every market in the same way. The same storm creates different weather in different places. And that difference is where you find the trade. First, look at Europe. It's in a tough spot. Think of it like a person who was already feeling a bit cold, and someone just stole their blanket. Europe is more dependent on imported energy, so this oil shock hits harder and faster. This puts immense pressure on the European Central Bank to keep money expensive. For the property market, this means one thing: it's about to go on ice. Higher mortgage rates crush what people can afford, pushing buyers to the sidelines. For anyone loaded up with debt, this is a moment of pain. But for a cash buyer, this is a signal. As the market slows and sellers get desperate, patient investors with cash can find bargains that were unthinkable just months ago. The crisis is creating a classic buyer's market for anyone who is liquid and ready. Now, let's turn to Dubai, a market right in the middle of the storm. This is the uncomfortable and therefore more interesting story. At first glance, it looks like a disaster. Panic is in the air. You hear about Dubai's real estate stock index falling 30%, wiping out its gains for the year. This is the ultimate stress test for Dubai's safe haven reputation. But here's the paradox. The stock market is like one person having a panic attack, but the physical building is still standing strong. Before the crisis, Dubai's market was red hot, with billions in sales, many of them in cash. Those cash deals make the market far more resilient to interest rate shocks. And the things that made Dubai a magnet for global wealth, the tax benefits, the lifestyle, its role as a hub, none of that has gone away. A 30% drop in the stock index is financial traders panicking. It is not a 30% drop in the value of a villa on the palm. This gap between fear and reality is the opportunity. The crisis is shaking the tree, forcing scared or over-leveraged owners to sell at a discount. For long-term investors, this is a rare window to buy prime assets on sale, betting on the market's long history of bouncing back. If this way of thinking helps you see the markets more clearly, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, and I want to know your strategy. Where is the bigger play? The slow cooling markets in Europe or the volatile, high-stakes game in Dubai? Drop your thoughts in the comments. So, let's bring it all home. The Hormuz blockade is not random noise. It's a trigger for a predictable sequence. The blockade spikes oil, the oil spike fuels inflation, and the central banks fight back, making money expensive. This one chain of events creates two plays. In Europe, it creates bargains for patient, cash-rich investors. In the UAE, it creates a crisis of confidence, opening a window for those willing to look past the fear. The headlines show chaos, but underneath, the machine is logical. Smart investors don't follow the panic, they follow the pattern. If you're still looking at real estate without reading this bigger chain, then you aren't investing, you're just shopping. Disclaimer: this content represents our personal opinion and is for informational purposes only. It is not to be construed as any form of investment advice. Please consult your lawyer, accountant, and financial planner to obtain any form of specific advice